I was standing in the front yard of a $750,000 beach cottage on Folly Beach, South Carolina, holding a hand-painted wooden sign that read, "Welcome home, sweetheart." My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Don't sign that property over to your daughter. You're making the biggest mistake of your life." I read it twice, then a third time. The morning sun rose over the Atlantic, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange. And I was supposed to be the happiest I had been in 5 years. 11 days until my daughter's wedding, 11 days until I handed her the keys to the cottage I had spent 18 months restoring with my own hands. And some stranger was telling me to stop. I almost deleted it. Instead, I called back. 7 rings. No answer. I tried again and again. 11 calls before I gave up. I told myself it was a wrong number, a prank, someone who had no idea what this cottage meant to me, or the memories I had poured into every repainted shutter and every refinished floorboard. My wife would have loved this place. She passed 5 years ago from pancreatic cancer and never got to see me finish it. But she had been the one pointing out this little rundown cottage the last summer we drove out to Folly Beach together. Wrapped in a blanket, even in July, she said, "If you ever want to do something with your hands again, do that one." I bought it 8 months after her funeral. 18 months and more money than I wanted to admit later. The sagging, salt-rotted wreck was something she would have been proud of. 35 years building a construction development company in Charleston had taught me about sacrifices, early mornings, missed dinners, and the cost of family. My daughter had watched me leave. Now I owed her something no contract could capture. This cottage was my apology and my promise. I set the welcome sign against the porch railing and drove home. 6 more unanswered calls before midnight. 3 days later, my phone rang at 10 p.m., a number I didn't have saved. I answered on the second ring. "Ray?" The voice was older, rougher than I remembered. "Dennis Puit." I sat down slowly. Dennis Puit, my former project manager from the early 2000s, a man I had worked shoulder to shoulder with for nearly a decade before he moved to Greenville to care for his mother. Christmas cards exchanged for a few years, then nothing. 12 years later, here he was. "I know it's coming out of nowhere, Ray, but I sent that text last week. I needed to be sure you would call back before I said anything." His voice was careful, measured. I felt something cold settle in my chest. "What did this have to do with my daughter's wedding 2 weeks ago?" he explained. "I was finishing a closing at the office late, maybe 7:30. I was alone, or I thought I was. The conference room door wasn't latched all the way. Your son-in-law came in with a woman I didn't recognize and an attorney I had seen around town. They were there for almost an hour. I heard everything. Everything about? They were talking about the deed transfer." Dennis's voice dropped. "About the deed transfer." The woman kept insisting on perfect timing. The attorney explained how property received as a gift during marriage is handled differently in a divorce if the receiving spouse controls it alone. My mouth went dry. Divorce. They laughed about how long it would take. 18 months would be plenty. And she said something that hit like a brick. "By the time the old man realizes what happened, the deed will have been transferred twice, and there won't be anything left to argue about." I stood from the kitchen table without thinking. Who was the woman? Dennis paused. I looked up the attorney afterward. And Ray, the woman was his sister, an estate attorney from Columbia. Then he asked if I remembered Gerald Stokes. The name hit like a physical blow. Gerald Stokes had come to me in 2005 with an investment proposal, a waterfront development that promised huge returns. I had done due diligence, discovered falsified environmental assessments, walked away, and filed a complaint with the state contractors board. Stokes lost his license, his company folded within a year. He died in 2018, with very little left. "Dennis," I said slowly. "His daughter's name? Patricia. But she goes by something else now. And the man my daughter was marrying? Gerald Stokes' son." I stayed in my office until 2 a.m., staring at the family photos. My daughter at her college graduation, both of us squinting in the afternoon sun. She had her mother's eyes, her mother's laugh. 5 years of trying to be enough for both of them. And now this. When had she met him? 18 months ago, at a mutual friend's birthday party. Charming, attentive. He remembered details she mentioned in passing. I had liked him, genuinely. I went to the filing cabinet the next morning. My daughter had asked in February to update the property transfer documentation. "Just making sure everything is in order before the wedding," she said. I signed where she showed me, trusting her implicitly. But buried on page 4 of 6, a clause I had never discussed transferred management authority to something called Coastal Legacy Holdings LLC in the event of a change in primary occupancy. I grabbed my laptop, searched the South Carolina Secretary of State Business Registry. Coastal Legacy Holdings LLC, registered February 2024. Managing member, a name I didn't recognize. Registered agent, a Columbia law firm. There she was. Same eyes as her father, different name. I called my attorney at 8 a.m. In his office by 9. 30 years of trusted counsel, silent listening, measured advice. Ray, how much does your daughter know about this? He asked. I don't know yet, I admitted. That matters, he said. Significantly, the LLC structure was clever. If the divorce had gone through, the property management clause would have allowed Coastal Legacy to lease the cottage, encumber it, maybe force a sale. By the time I understood, the asset would be diluted. Do you know why she changed her name? Robert asked. To distance herself from her father's history in the market. She couldn't practice under Stokes without my past complaint appearing in background checks. You need a private investigator, he said, and find out what your daughter knew and when. I hired Carol Webb. Within 48 hours, she reported back. The man my daughter was marrying had $178,000 in personal debt, 2 maxed credit cards, a car loan behind, a private loan at a sky-high rate. His sister's firm had no major clients in South Carolina. She had found my daughter first, not the other way around. The mutual friend's birthday party? Not accidental. I needed answers without tipping my hand. I invited my daughter to dinner that Sunday, just the two of us. The way we had always done. I cooked rosemary chicken, opened a bottle of wine. She talked about centerpieces and catering, honeymoon plans. I excused myself, placed my phone to record in the hallway, returned to coffee casually. Sweetheart, remind me, what's the name of the LLC your attorney set up? I asked. She froze for a split second. Coastal Legacy, she said. And who manages it? I pressed. His sister handles most of the administrative side. She's been really helpful. I nodded. Enough. Monday morning, Robert listened to the recording in Carol's report. Your daughter may have known about the LLC, he said. But there's a meaningful difference between knowing and being the architect of a fraud scheme. Gerald Stokes' son grew up watching his father lose everything. His sister built a career around recovering what she believes the family lost. Your daughter walked into a relationship with a man already playing a long game. Tuesday, Robert filed a motion to void the property transfer clause, citing fraudulent inducement. A judge granted a temporary hold. The Bar Association received a complaint against the estate attorney. Carol confirmed disciplinary records. Thursday morning, I changed my will, leaving most to the Low Country Housing Trust, but a bequest for Dennis Puett, who had picked up the phone after 12 years. Friday, I spent alone at the cottage. Walking through every room, touching the reclaimed heart pine floors, built-in bookshelves, the clawfoot tub refinished over nights in my garage. My daughter had been there for so much of it. She had brought me lunch on Saturdays, helped pick exterior colors, argued over shades of soft blue until she chose the one her mother would have liked. I stood in the kitchen, listening to the ocean, patient as always. The rehearsal dinner was Saturday evening at a restaurant on East Bay Street. 40 guests, immediate family, close friends, long wooden tables bathed in candlelight. Laughter flowed easily, oblivious to the storm beneath the surface. The man my daughter was marrying arrived with his sister on his arm, poised, well-dressed, the patient smile of someone confident that the plan years in the making was about to conclude successfully. She shook my hand warmly. It's wonderful to finally spend time with you, she said. Likewise, I replied. Dinner was served. I sat 3 seats from my daughter, watching her laugh, touch her fiancé's arm, and look happy in a way that was either genuine or the most convincing performance I had ever seen. I spent the week trying to decide which it was, and I still didn't know. Halfway through the main course, the restaurant manager signaled that it was time for toasts. The best man first, then the maid of honor. Then the father of the groom spoke, words about building a life together that drew tears from several guests. And then it was my turn. I stood with my glass. The room quieted instantly, all eyes on me. I looked at my daughter first. She met my gaze with her mother's eyes, and I realized that what I was about to do could cost me something I couldn't measure. Then I looked at his sister, composed, expectant. I've been thinking a lot this week about what it means to build something, I said. I spent 35 years in construction. I know what goes into a foundation. I know the difference between something built to last and something built to look good long enough to sell. The room was still. About 12 days ago, I received a text message from a number I didn't recognize. It told me not to transfer my cottage to my daughter. I almost ignored it. I'm glad I didn't. I saw the color shift in her face. Her composure held, but just barely. I'd like to tell everyone what I found when I started looking. I reached into my jacket and set a single folded document on the table. Coastal Legacy Holdings LLC was registered in February of this year. The managing member is the woman sitting here tonight who has been introduced to my family as a helpful estate attorney. Her legal name until 2019 was Patricia Stokes. Her father was Gerald Stokes, whose contractor's license I helped revoke in 2005 after discovering he falsified environmental assessments on a waterfront development. Someone at the far end of the table made a sound. The man my daughter was marrying went completely still. The management clause buried in the documents I signed in February would have given Coastal Legacy authority over my cottage if the primary occupant changed. The attorney who drafted those documents had a disciplinary history in another state. The mutual friend who introduced my daughter to the man she was planning to marry is a client of Coastal Legacy Holdings. I let that settle. This was not a romance. This was a recovery operation, executed through my daughter. The room was silent. I looked at her, hands flat on the table, face unreadable. I have spent this week trying to understand how much you knew, I said quietly, directly. I don't have a clean answer, but I know that what's been done to you is not the same as what's been done to me. There's a difference. Two officers, previously positioned near the entrance, moved toward the table. The estate attorney rose before they reached her. Her composure finally broke not in tears, but in a cold, controlled manner. You destroyed my father, she said. The words carried across the room. Everything he built, everything we had, I said, steady. Your father falsified documents that would have endangered buyers who trusted him. I reported everything I had found. That was the right thing to do. I am sorry for what it cost your family, but it doesn't change what you did here. She was escorted out, her brother silent beside her. The performance was finished. The rehearsal dinner ended as all things do when the ground shifts without warning. Guests spoke in hushed voices. Some left quickly. Others lingered uncertainly. My daughter sat alone at the end of the table. I came to her. Candles burned low. Her eyes were dry. How much did you know? I asked. I sat across from her, voice even. She was quiet. I knew the LLC was being set up. He told me it was an asset protection structure. Standard, she said. I should have asked more questions. Yes, I said. You should have. I didn't know about his father. I didn't know who his sister was before. I don't know if you believe me, she said. Her mother's eyes stared back at me. I don't know yet either, I told her honestly. But I want to. She nodded slowly. That was enough for that night. I drove home alone over the bridge spanning the Stono River. Windows down. Warm April air, heavy with salt. The wedding was called off before midnight. The man my daughter had been planning to marry for 18 months was answering questions at a downtown precinct, while his sister consulted an attorney who wasn't family. The cottage was still mine. Every floorboard, every repainted shutter, every reclaimed pine plank I had cut and laid by hand. I drove to Folly Beach before sunrise, letting myself in with the key that had never left my pocket. I stood in the dark kitchen, listening to the ocean, patient, indifferent to everything humans build and lose. My daughter called at 8 a.m. We talked for a long time not about forgiveness, not yet. About what she knew, what she chose not to see, and what it means when you trust someone because you want to, stopping short of the questions that might give a harder answer. She was honest, not completely, but enough to see the shape of the truth we would rebuild over the coming months. I told her the cottage was still hers. Someday, when she understood what I had built and what it had cost, she said she understood. I set my phone on the kitchen counter and stood at the window, looking out at the water. Dennis Pewitt was about to start his new position on Tuesday. Robert Haynes was filing the final injunction paperwork that afternoon. The Bar Association complaint would move through its process over the coming months. Gerald Stokes had died in 2018 with very little to his name. I could not let that outcome stand. I had filed my complaint 20 years ago, not for revenge, but because staying silent felt like participating. His daughter had taken that loss and sharpened it into a mechanism aimed at me, using my love for my child as leverage. I thought about the welcome sign I had leaned against the porch railing 11 days ago before any of this unfolded, hand-painted. Welcome home, sweetheart. It was still out there. I brought it inside, setting it against the kitchen wall. My wife would have reminded me that being right is only the beginning, not the end. She always knew the difference between justice and understanding better than I did. What I did that night at the restaurant was necessary. What I did the morning after, when my daughter called, was even more important. 35 years of building things to outlast me, structures with solid foundations, honest materials, work done the right way, even when no one was watching, had prepared me for this. My daughter was somewhere in the middle of understanding that. I was somewhere in the middle of understanding what it would take to rebuild something compromised before the foundation ever cured. The ocean outside remained patient. I had time. If you have followed this story to the end, I want to ask you something. When someone uses the people you love most as instruments of harm, how do you separate the wound from the wound maker? How do you look at your child and hold two truths at once? The love that never stops and the accountability that cannot be skipped. I do not have a clean answer. I had justice on a Saturday night and a conversation with my daughter on a Sunday morning, and neither alone was sufficient. Together, they were a beginning. The cottage sits on Folly Beach, April light streaming through the windows, floors refinished by hand. The keys are in my pocket. Someday, when we are ready, I will hand them over. This story matters because the questions at its center about trust, about family, about how much love can hold, and what it costs to find the truth belong to all of us.